Hi there and welcome to this video regarding Ken Ham and what happened to the dinosaurs. Now, it does bear saying that before I actually watched this video, I wasn't overly familiar with Ken Ham as an individual. I knew he was a New Earth creationist and I had some vague ideas that he was building a Ark museum, which was kind of cool from a certain point of view, but definitely not scientific. But recently he had a discussion with Bill Nye, and several of my friends said, really got to go and see it, you've really got to go and see it. So I went on YouTube, found the discussion. I was just absolutely amazed by his level of scientific ignorance, and so I decided to have a look at some more of his videos, and this was the first one that came up on my YouTube feed when I typed in his name, and I watched it and I think my jaw hit the floor, so I had to make a refutation video to it. A little bit of information about me. I actually was brought up in a semi-religious household. I was told that we were made in God's image and that the theory of evolution was wrong, and I told that I had to pray and that we were sinful, but I wasn't overly made to go to church or anything like that. And as I grew up, I realised the folly of all this and became quite sceptical toward religions. I was asking questions and I wasn't getting anything near the answers that I required to make me believe. Anyway, without further ado, let's have a look at this video and see what Ken has to say.
What really happened to the dinosaurs?
Many people are perplexed by the topic of dinosaurs. Where did they come from? When did they live? What happened to them? You see, when you dig up a dinosaur skeleton, it doesn't come with a label attached saying, "Hi, I'm 65 million years old and this is what happened to me." We have to interpret that skeleton in relation to the past.
No, dinosaurs do not come with labels giving information of their age, but nobody says that they do or assume that. The fossil record can give a rough estimate, but depends upon the circumstances, and is not the only tool used to determine age. When you say that we have to interpret the skeleton in relation to the past, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt and say that you mean in relation to scientific knowledge, but given your predisposition towards young Earth creationism, I don't think that this is going to be the case.
So where did dinosaurs come from? What happened to them? When did they live? I want to show you that when you take God at his word in the book of Genesis, that we can explain dinosaurs, and observational science actually confirms that explanation based upon the Bible.
The Bible is not a science book. Firstly, you're not taking God at his word. You are taking the word of people who interpreted what they believed their God wanted. Secondly, you are opening up your investigation with your mind already made up. Science doesn't allow you to decide what you want and then simply cherry pick the arguments that support it and brush everything else under the table.
See, the Bible tells us that God made the land animals on day 6 of creation. And who else was created on day 6? Well, Adam and Eve. And how long ago was that? Well, when you add up all the dates in the Bible, about 6,000 years.
The problem again is that you provide utterly no evidence for this. Genesis may say that animals and man were created on the 6th day, but a document that was written by Bronze Age goat herders, translated, retranslated, edited, and so on and so forth is not evidence. You may believe this to be true, but you would be wrong. Also, the Earth is approximately 4.5 billion years old. We know this because of science, and unfortunately, no matter how much you say that the Earth is only 6,000 years old because your book says it is, this does not change the truth.
So, taking God at his word in Genesis, dinosaurs lived beside people about 6,000 years ago. And they were vegetarian to start with. Genesis chapter 1 verse 29 tells us that all the animals were vegetarian.
What? No, they weren't. I'm going to require actual evidence that can be tested to believe this. If you're watching this video as well as listening to it, you'll see the rather simple graphic I've put up. Yes, it is from a Google search, but it does demonstrate the point quite clearly. Carnivore teeth are sharp and pointed for tearing flesh. Herbivores' teeth are flat for grinding up plant matter.
But then Adam sinned, and because of sin, everything changed. The whole of creation now groans because of sin. In fact, after the event of Noah's flood, God told Noah that now humans could eat meat, could eat animal flesh. But before that time, they were instructed only to be vegetarian. So sometime after sin, obviously animals started changing their diets as well.
This video is making me drink rum now. In case you missed that, it was only after the flood that animals could or did start eating flesh. This is due to sin causing creation to groan, which I'm not entirely sure what he means by this. He claims that all animals were vegetarian before the flood and then began to eat meat after they disembarked from the ark. Now, ignoring the fact that this is blatant fantasy, does this mean that prior to the ark, carnivores with pointed teeth ate plant matter with great difficulty, therefore throwing into the question the idea of intelligent design? Now, I do admit the hasn't actually mentioned this yet, but him being a young Earth creationist, I would be willing to bet a substantial amount of money on him believing so. Or does it mean that when they got off the ark, they underwent some extremely fast period of evolution to change the shape of their teeth? And if this is the case, why haven't we found any fossils to indicate the period before this change? These are just some of the questions he brings up without any attempt at answering.
And the Bible tells us that there was a global flood, and 2 of every kind of land-dwelling, air-breathing animal went on board the boat that Noah built, Noah's Ark. Now, people often say, wait a minute, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dinosaur kinds. No, there might be hundreds of dinosaur names, and many of those names are given to different variations within a dinosaur kind. But when you actually work through it, there's probably less than 50 dinosaur kinds. The T-Rex type kind, the raptor type kind, the sauropod type kind, and so it goes on.
I'm not even going to go into detail here about what is obviously wrong with that statement. I'm not a paleontologist, so I offhand cannot give you an exact amount of dinosaur species that have been identified at this date. However, I do know that you cannot simply dismiss the vast majority of them without any evidence. Ken, you've got to pick your side of the argument here. Either there are variations of each kind of dinosaur that you have suggested that got on the ark and survived the flood, or else there wasn't variation and the types subsequently evolved in a very short amount of time. Both of these are wrong, but pick a camp and have the decency to stand in it rather than just utter vague, meaningless statements that don't really tell us anything about what you believed happened.
And the other thing to remember is that the average size of a dinosaur is only the size of a sheep or a German shepherd dog or a small pony or something like that. You see, some of the dinosaurs did grow large, like the sauropods, but even they hatched from eggs and were once young adults, and so would not have been that large. Actually, there was plenty of room on board Noah's Ark for 2 of every kind of the dinosaur kind. And I'm sure that God chose those young adults that were ready for the new world to populate in the new world.
Again, this is simply not true. While some dinosaurs were no bigger than your average chicken today, some of them were truly monstrous in size, far eclipsing any living land animal that is currently in existence. I would be interested to see where you got this conclusion from, but it clearly doesn't take into account the variation in size found in the different eras. You being sure that God chose something doesn't make it true. This is little more than desperately trying to justify your inexcusable lack of scientific knowledge and blindly following the words of your holy book despite everything screaming at you that it is fundamentally wrong and impossible. The Ark was not real, nor did it take only teenage dinosaurs on board in some type of scaly youth club to escape your God throwing a hissy fit and drowning everything because one species had not followed the commands that he hadn't yet laid down to the letter.
What happened to those land animals that didn't go on board the Ark? They were drowned. Many of them turned into fossils. The dinosaur fossils we find, most of them probably come from the time of the flood, over 4,300 years ago, and therefore they're only thousands of years old, not millions of years old. Those that came off the Ark started to spread out over the earth, and then, because of changing conditions, many animals have become extinct, including the dinosaurs. Really, for animals to become extinct is nothing new. We see it happening every year. Now, is there any evidence that's consistent with that explanation of dinosaurs? Actually, there is lots of evidence consistent with that. We have dragon legends all over the earth, just as we have flood legends. Flood legends attest to the fact there was a real flood.
We also have legends on fairies, angels, ghosts, aliens, demons, sprites, mermaids, unicorns, Pegasus, wizards, witches, shamans, soothsayers, the Kraken, the Loch Ness Monster, vampires, werewolves, and genies, to name a few. This doesn't make them true.
dragon legends attest to the fact there were real animals called dragons, and the descriptions of those creatures in many instances fit the dinosaurs. And then there are cave paintings all over the earth done by people hundreds of years ago who drew animals that they were familiar with, and some of those paintings look just like the dinosaurs.
I'm just going to read a little bit out of the Bible here, so please bear with me. The chapter is Revelations 12:3 and onwards, and the verse is, "Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth." Now that doesn't sound like any dinosaur that I have ever heard of. In fact, if you continue to read, it goes on to say, and I quote, "The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan." This is the problem with cherry-picking quotes to make your point. They are utterly useless without context. Now, the passage I just read and the intervening ones can have 2 meanings. Either the literal meaning, in which case Satan is a 7-headed, 10-horned dragon who extinguished a third of the stars in the sky. Or it could be interpreted as a metaphor of the struggle between good and evil. I think they are both nonsense, but at no point does it detail how this supposed dragon, was in fact a dinosaur. I would also like proof about these cave paintings, not just a throwaway statement.
And there's even indication in the Bible of a dinosaur that lived beside a man after the flood. Go and read the book of Job, Job chapter 40, verse 15. Behemoth, the largest land animal God made. The description fits something like a sauropod dinosaur living with Job after the flood.
Job 15 mentions a behemoth that feeds on grass like an ox. The utter lack of description of this supposed beast makes me think it was either non-existent in the first place, or else was something along the lines of an elephant, which would fit much better within the bounds of reality.
We've also found in our present world dinosaur bones with what appear to be red blood cells and soft tissue still in them, indicating they can't be millions of years old.
Here, I think he's talking about the Mary Schweitzer discovery in 2007. Firstly, this does not prove that they are only a few thousand years old. This is an exception, it's not the rule, and it was found under unique circumstances. Mary Schweitzer is a Christian, but rejects the young Earth theory or that dinosaurs were supposedly on the Ark. Ken, you can't just hijack other people's work and, despite what the results say, twist them to fit your own agenda, especially when the actual scientist goes out of her way to point out they don't support young Earth.
When people ask me what happened to the dinosaurs, my usual answer is, well, they died. But of course, they didn't die out millions of years ago. Many died at the time of the flood. And those that were alive on Noah's Ark, their descendants died out sometime after the flood. It's the Bible's history that explains dinosaurs.
So, to conclude, you have failed to explain anything about dinosaurs. You did not explain where they came from, where they went, or how observational science supports your skewed view. I cannot begin to fathom how much evidence you must have ignored, discarded, or failed to understand simply because it did not fit in with your preconceived idea. Your book is a fairy tale at worst, and at the very, very best, and I am being quite lenient here, a collection of stories and metaphors for people who lived thousands of years ago, and is not, except in the very broadest sense, suitable for society today. Ken, it's an F for utter abject failure from me. Back to grade 1 science for you while I attempt to forget everything you just said with this very large bottle of rum.